with our first video of the day. Tasting History posted this a couple days ago, so I thought that we should watch this because it's another spooky one. It's Dracula's Paprika Handel from the original novel. So some vampire food. All right, chat, lock in.
Count Dracula, the most famous vampire in history, had a really monotonous diet. After all, he hated garlic. Garlic! And he couldn't even enjoy a glass of wine.
I never drink. Why?
No, the poor guy had nothing to look forward to but the blood of his victims. Very boring. Fortunately for me, I am not a vampire, so I can enjoy both the food and the drink that are mentioned in Bram Stoker's 19th century novel, Dracula. Like this
Based on Vlad the Impaler, loosely.
1890 recipe for paprika handel or chicken paprikash. So thank you to Factor for sponsoring this video as I make the paprika handel from Bram Stoker's Dracula, this time on Tasting History.
Let's go. I love these videos.
In 1897, the Irish...
Can I turn this off? Does it look bad? Does me having the lamp off look weird? It does. Lamp stays on.
Author Bram Stoker published the Gothic novel Dracula. And when it came out, it received mostly good reviews, but was often criticized for having too much horror in it. Go figure. But why, you may ask, am I talking about a novel on Tasting History? Well, it mostly has to do with the first part of the book. See, the novel is written in the epistolary style, meaning that it's actually told through a series of letters and diaries and newspaper clippings and journal entries. And the first chapter is actually the journal entry of the character Jonathan Harker. He is a solicitor from England who is going to Transylvania to meet with Count Dracula, who wants to buy some property outside of London. And on his journey across Central Europe, he basically writes it as a travel blog, mostly talking about the food that he's eating. As he enters the Transylvanian town of Klausenburg, he writes, "Here I stopped for the night at the Hotel Royal. I had for dinner, or rather supper, a chicken done up some way with red pepper, which was very good, but thirsty. Memoranda, get recipe for Mina. I asked the waiter, and he said it was called paprika handel, and that, as it was a national dish, I should be able to get it anywhere along the Carpathians." Now today you might be hard-pressed to find paprika handel on any menu, especially near Transylvania, and that is because the word handel is actually a German word for chicken. But since Transylvania was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time, it uses the German word. After all, Harker writes, "I found my smattering of German very useful here. Indeed, I don't know how I should be able to get on without it." Now today the dish is more often known by its Hungarian name paprikash csirke, or chicken paprikash.
Is that paprikash?
Now Harker notes in his journal to get recipe for Mina, Mina being his fiancée back in England. But since he soon meets Count Dracula and that all ends up with him in a hospital in Hungary, I'm guessing he never actually got that recipe to send back to Mina. Fortunately for me, there is
because didn't you have, like... You had a copy of the original Dracula, right? You can show me later.
A recipe for it in a cookbook called Volodymyr Szekechenyi, published in Budapest in 1892, just 2 years after the novel is supposed to take place. And it starts off by telling you how to butcher a chicken, and then it says to put a piece of fat the size of a large egg into a pot. When the fat is hot, add 2 finely chopped onions and a tin spoonful of fine red paprika. Then immediately add the chicken. Salt it, pour on half a liter of water, cover, and stirring often, let it simmer for half an hour. Meanwhile, take care that it does not boil to pieces. When the chicken is tender, prepare a gravy thickening with 3 deciliters of very good sour cream and a small spoon of flour. Pour this into the chicken broth, stir it well, and boil together. Serve it on a long platter surrounded by egg barley or galushka, dumplings. Not too far off from the modern recipe. So for this dish, what you'll need is 4 to 5 pounds or 2 kilograms of chicken cut into pieces. Legs and thighs work well. 2 tablespoons of schmaltz, which is rendered chicken fat, though lard or vegetable oil will also work. 2 medium onions, about 500 grams finely chopped. 1 tablespoon of salt for the chicken, plus another teaspoon for the onions. 2 tablespoons of sweet Hungarian paprika. 2 cups or 500 milliliters of water or chicken stock. I'm using stock simply because it's going to add more flavor. 1 1/4 cup or 300 grams of sour cream, and 1 tablespoon of flour. Now, as much as I'm looking forward to trying this dish, it does take a little time to make, so to hold me over, I'm going to enjoy a meal from today's sponsor, Factor.
It's an ad.
So start off by patting your chicken dry and seasoning it with a tablespoon of salt. Then set it aside while you add the schmaltz or other fat to a large pot and heat it over medium-high heat. Once it's hot and glistening, add in the onions and sprinkle with the other teaspoon of salt. Then toss the onions to coat them in the oil and let them cook for 10 minutes or until they're soft and golden. Then remove the pot from the heat and sprinkle in the paprika. And you want to have it off the heat so the paprika doesn't burn as you mix it in with the onions. Once the onions are coated, you can return the pot to the heat and add in the chicken, tossing it to coat in the paprika and the onion, and it helps to add just a few pieces at a time. Let the chicken cook for just a few minutes to get some color, turning it every minute or so, and then pour in the water or the chicken stock and let it come to a simmer, and then reduce the heat to medium-low and cover the pot and simmer for 30 minutes, stirring every 10 minutes or so. You want the chicken to get nice and tender, but you don't want it falling apart. Once the chicken's about ready, mix the sour cream and the flour together until smooth, and then stir in a little of the hot liquid to temper the sour cream, and then pour all of that into the pot, stir it in, and let it gently simmer until the sauce thickens. I let it simmer for about 20 minutes. And even when it's done, you want to leave it on the stove on the lowest setting just to leave it to warm and have all of the flavors come together. It really helps. And you can use that time to make your galushka, or your dumplings that this dish is typically served with. But before we make those, I just wanted to let you know that I have signed a bunch more tasting history cookbooks, and I'm working with several small independent...
Should we get one? There's one in Boston. There's one in Boston. I could order it.
Independent bookstores around the country to get those out. So I'll put a link to that in the description, or you can just head to tastinghistory.com/cookbook as
Hold on, chat. How much is it? Oh, it's only $32.50. I want one. I'm not gonna get it now, but I kind of want one because I probably would use it. We'd probably use it for the cooking stream.
I talk a bit more about the different foods mentioned in Bram Stoker's Dracula. People love vampires. They have been the subject of books and movies and TV shows for over 200 years. And one reason I think that we like them so much is because they're so often based in reality. Not the vampires themselves, but the worlds in which they inhabit. Like Buffy the Vampire Slayer is just a typical high school girl, and the characters in True Blood just live in your average Louisiana town. And it is the same with Dracula. Bram Stoker pulled from actual places and actual people to ground the story in reality, which then makes the horror aspect all the more frightening. Obviously, there are the locations like Transylvania and Whitby in England, but also some of the characters themselves are inspired by real people. Dracula himself was inspired by the 15th century Wallachian ruler Vlad Dracula, better known as Vlad the Impaler, and I'm actually going to be doing a video about him for Villains Month. Now, the degree to which Vlad actually inspired Dracula is kind of up for debate. It seems that mostly it was just the name Dracula, which at the time that Bram Stoker was writing meant devil in Romanian. Then, of course, there are the
Sometimes it means son of the devil, too. Because Vlad the Impaler's father was named, his surname was Dracul, and Dracula meant that Vlad the Impaler was the son of Dracul, or son of the devil. Yeah. I just watched a Wendigoon video on Vlad the Impaler before I found this, so I'm kind of like, I have that on the brain right now.
Tales of Vlad the Impaler drinking the blood of his enemies, and so that made a good jumping off point for the vampire.
There's a story of Vlad the Impaler, like, dipping bread in blood. And things like that.
In the story.
So
another character who is inspired by real-life people
could be where they get it from.
is the doctor, scientist, and sometimes vampire hunter Van Helsing. Stoker based him and his profession of vampire hunter on people like Ernst Frumbald, who was an official at the Austrian court who, in 1725, was charged with investigating the alleged vampire known as Petar Blagojevich. See, a small Serbian town had been terrorized by someone who had recently died. He had come back to life, supposedly, and killed 9 other villagers. And so they got this Frumbald to come and investigate what was going on. Now, unlike Van Helsing, Frumbald seems to have been rather skeptical that vampires existed. But just like Van Helsing, he did end up being involved in the staking of this supposed vampire Blagojevich. A newspaper from the time said that he ended up going with the villagers to dig up the grave, and after opening the coffin, they saw that the deceased's body was undecomposed, as if it had been buried for a few hours, not 10 weeks ago. After being pierced with a hawthorn stalk, fresh red blood poured from Petar's body, nose, and ears. Then the body was burned while the priest read the prayers. After this act, the mysterious deaths in the village stopped. But perhaps the character that grounds the story in reality more than any other is Jonathan Harker. I mean, what is more realistic and rather mundane than a lawyer going to do a real estate deal with a rich guy? And as if to double down on the mundanity of Harker's trip to Dracula's castle, he uses the first few pages as essentially a travel blog detailing the food that he has been eating. And just like with a modern travel blog, he not only talks about the food, but goes on about his feelings toward the food, like with the paprika hendel, which he calls very thirsty. Now, at first I thought this meant that he thought it was dry, like the chicken was dry, but the next morning he actually blames the dish or one of its ingredients for a restless evening, and so we get a little bit more context. I did not sleep well, though my bed was comfortable enough, for I had all sorts of queer dreams. There was a dog howling all night under my window, which may have had something to do with it. Or it may have been the paprika, for I had to drink up all the water in my carafe and was still thirsty. So while the reader knows that there's something sinister in the air that is causing Harker to lose sleep, he blames it on his delicate English constitution, though he does try it again the next morning for breakfast. I had for breakfast more paprika, and a sort of porridge of maize flour, which they said was mamaliga, and eggplant stuffed with forcemeat, a very excellent dish which they called impletata. Memorandum, get recipe for this also. Mamaliga is a Romanian dish similar to polenta, made with corn from the Americas, though as corn was not in that area until about...
What is that? What is that? It looks like if you mix like scrambled eggs and an English muffin together. I'm not eating that.
Made with corn from the Americas, though as corn was not in that area until about I think the 17th century.
I don't want to know what's like in it. I want to see someone like cut into that.
It used to be made out of millet. Now the impletata was a little bit harder to find because there really is no dish called impletata, but rather there is a dish called umpleta, or a variation on that word, which means stuffed. And to this day, there is a dish, either zucchini or eggplant, that is stuffed with ground beef. But the meal that really sent me down a rabbit hole...
If it wasn't like an eggplant with stuff stuffed in it, I would eat that.
And it is a rabbit hole, which I invite you to join me down, was the meal that Harker had the night before he met with Dracula. I dined on what they called robber steak, bits of bacon, onion, and beef seasoned with red pepper and strung on sticks and roasted over the fire.
My dad makes something like that with zucchini. Okay.
In the simple style of the London cat's meat. I'm sorry, what? Cat's meat? What exactly was going on in London at this time? I do know that Mrs. Lovett from Sweeney Todd complained that her neighbor, Mrs. Mooney, was turning cats into pies, but I kind of thought that...
Don't let... Allie, do not let Memer or Gubert or Snowy near 19th century English people.
Was a story, and it turns out it was, because at this time, cat's meat did not refer to the meat of cats, but rather meat for cats. The meat was actually horse meat. And today we kind of don't even think about how omnipresent horses were back in the day, but essentially, if you look around on the street, for every car or every truck that you see, there were a couple horses that would have been in that place. And just like with cars, there was an entire economy that circulated around horses. There were coachmen to drive them, farriers to shoe them, saddlers to make their saddles and harnesses, and grooms to care for them. But just as today we have tow trucks to pick up a car that dies...
Yeah, horses were really important to like most cultures everywhere for centuries.
Back then, they had something called knackers to pick up a horse that died. They usually took it to a slaughterhouse, and people, especially in London, did not eat horse meat during this period, so the meat went to other places, including to feed the cats and dogs of London. Cats at this time were very important because they played the crucial role of keeping the rat population down, and they were more prevalent in where...
Look at this one. He's a sleepy guy. He's so cute.
Houses and near docks and more industrial areas, but also in the nicer parts of town, and so the cat meat men were selling everywhere. They'd go around town with boiled and roasted horse meat on skewers to feed to the cats of London, hence Harker's comparing them to a dish known as robber steak, which is essentially bacon-wrapped beef and onion skewers. And there is a...
We're sleeping right now.
Great description of the cat's meat man doing his job in the 1868 children's magazine Chatterbox. As the cat's meat man passes by different houses and announces his approach by a peculiar nasal yell, the cats may be seen furtively stealing up their respective areas and eagerly seizing the meat which is thrown down to them. In large warehouses or breweries in the city where numerous cats are kept, feeding time is a scene almost worthy of the zoological gardens. So fond are our London cats of this meat that after being long accustomed to it, they turn away with a well-bred disgust when anything else is offered to them as a substitute. Now, like I said, I really fell down the rabbit hole with this subject, and I am not at the bottom yet because I found a little tidbit of interesting history about a particular cat's meat man, or rather cat's meat woman, that just kind of ties in perfectly with the
whenever the next time you kill a horse is.
Whole horror theme of this episode. Her name was Harriet Hardiman, and she ran a cat's meat shop with her son on the ground floor of 29 Hanbury Street. And in September of 1888, she gave an interview about something horrible.
What do you mean, well?
That had happened on the premises. I went to bed on Friday night at 10:30. I was awakened by the trampling through the passage at about 6 o'clock. My son was asleep, and I told him to go to the back as I thought there was a fire. He returned and said that a woman had been killed in the yard. I did not go out of my room. The woman in question was Annie Chapman, the second known victim of Jack the Ripper. Like I said...
Whoa.
I really fell down the rabbit hole, and I totally think it was worth it because I've always been fascinated with Jack the Ripper, and just what an interesting little historic tidbit there. Anyway, I digress. Back to the meals of Dracula. Now, Jonathan Harker mentions several different drinks that he enjoys on his journey. One is a wine called Golden Mediash, which was named after the Transylvanian town of the same name. And another drink is offered to him on the coach ride up to Dracula's castle. The rather creepy coachman tells him, "The night is chill, mine Herr, and my master the Count bade me take all care of you. There is a flask of Slivovitz, the plum brandy of the country, underneath the seat, if you should require it." I did not take any, but it was a comfort to know it was there all the same. And I actually got some of this Slivovitz, and they started selling it in 1894, this brand, so it would have been around when the book was written. So I wanted to try it. Here we go. That's going to put hair on your chest. It does not taste like plum, I can tell you that. That is a strong brandy. But it's actually kind of nice. There is a sweetness to it. I find it, there is a sweetness that isn't there with like a grape or an apple brandy, but It's really strong. Anyway, the last drink that Harker
I mean, I'm not the
mentions
one drinking it.
is a wine that is served to him just
That's what we should do. On my 21st birthday, not next year, the year after, we should do an alcohol tasting stream.
before he
I don't know
is
if I can do that on
actually
Twitch,
accosted by three vampires.
Actually, no, wait, because Joe Bart did an alcohol tier list, right? Yeah, I can do that on Twitch.
In Dracula's castle, and it is served to him by Count Dracula himself. The Count himself came forward and took off the cover of a dish, and I fell to at once on an excellent roast chicken. This with some cheese and salad, and a bottle of Old Tokai, of which I had 2 glasses, was my supper. It is strange that as yet I have not seen the Count eat or drink. He must be a very peculiar man. Peculiar indeed. Now exactly what this wine was is hard to say, but it would have come from the Tokai region of Hungary and Slovakia. They make all sorts of wine, but they're most famous for their sweet white wines and their really sweet dessert wines, usually called Royal Tokai or Imperial Tokai. But I figured I would get this sweet white to drink with my paprika hendel, which I can make, or rather eat, after I make the galushka. So for this recipe, which also comes from the 1890 cookbook, what you'll need is 3 eggs, 2.5 cups or 300 grams of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, 3 tablespoons.
I'm so glad he gives the recipes in, like, the modern measurements, because I do want to make some of these. I think it would be super fun.
Or 45 grams of melted butter, plus a little bit more for coating the finished dumplings.
That garlic beef dish from when we did the Halloween video reactions. I really want to make that.
And a half cup or 120 milliliters of milk. Start by whisking the eggs in a large bowl until they're smooth, and then add in the flour, salt, and melted butter, and mix it until it starts to form a dough. Then add in the milk just a little bit at a time until you have what you might think of as a very stiff pancake batter. Once it's ready, bring the pot of water to a boil, and then you can make the dumplings either with a dedicated galushka maker, or you can use a cheese grater or just pinch off little pieces. With the maker though, you just put the batter in the top and then scrape it across the holes, and it will drip off into little bits. Do just a bit at a time, and after a few seconds they will float to the top, then let them continue to boil for about another 45 seconds, and then use a strainer to take them out of the pot and put them in a bowl, and pour a little bit of the melted butter over them and toss just to keep them from sticking together. Once they're done, you can dish them up along with the chicken and plenty of the salt.
What kind of dumplings are those? It looks really good though.
And here we are, the paprika hendel, or chicken paprika.
I could do without these like other sour cream bits. I don't really like sour cream. But the chicken looks good.
From Bram Stoker's Dracula. This has to be one of the best smelling dishes that I have ever made in this house. The whole house smells so good. Yeah, just by the scent you should make this, but I'm gonna try it. I knew that it was going to be so delicious, and I was right. So good. Let me just try the galushka. Sometimes these are also called gnocchi.
Yeah.
Same thing. They kind of remind me of just like buttered noodles. I've seen some modern recipes that have like, they add spices and other things to give them a little bit more flavor, because there's not a lot to it. It's just eggs and flour and milk. But they're really good. But it's the chicken. It's the chicken that's the star. You could also even make the chicken just with like rice or other noodles or whatever, because
Yeah,
the
that chicken
texture
would
is
probably
really
go over, like,
nice.
some
It
egg
is
noodles or
falling
something.
apart. It's still holding together. You don't want to let it go until it is actually falling apart, but it's so tender. But the flavor, it is, you get it is paprika forward. You could add even more paprika. The paprika is just...
because paprika is not actually that strong. When people make like spicy stuff, they're like, "Oh my, like how much paprika did you put in this?" No, that's usually it's like the chili powder, the cayenne.
So nice, and it is
Like,
sweet
paprika
paprika,
is
so it's
not-
not hot at all. This is what they
Oh, you use sweet
typically use
paprika.
for this dish in Hungary.
If I make this, I would do half and half. I would do half sweet and half spicy because I like a little bit of a kick.
It's just super flavorful. Between that and the onions, there's just this wonderful, homey, heartwarming, perfect for autumn and winter flavor. And yeah, you gotta make it. Also, I wanted to try it with the Tokai. Like I said, I got one of the sweet whites. These are more common today, but definitely throughout history, they've also had reds and all sorts of drier wines, but this is one of the sweeter whites. It's not dessert wine, though. Though it's on the cusp, it is rather sweet. Honestly, if you told me that it was apple cider, I would probably believe you. It's really good, though. It's not typically what you would expect when ordering a glass of wine, but I like it. And like I said, next week, as long as everything goes to plan, I will have a video on the historical person who inspired Count Dracula, Vlad the Impaler.
We'll have to watch that.
Don't forget, if you want a signed copy of the Tasting History Cookbook, links in the description.
I'm definitely going to look into the cookbook because that sounds really fun.